And I like Secretary call the roll.
All right. Jan Fang,
Here.
Nilza Serrano,
Here.
Robert Pierman here, Malcolm Gladstone, here, Ronald Jones, Mitra Kanani,
Here.
Sylvia Kwan, Ebony Lewis,
Here.
Charles Sonny Ward.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Well, we'll start our meeting. Again, the meeting is webcasted as our staff had just mentioned. And I also want to welcome a member from LATC who joined us through virtual meeting, I believe. And just remind you that you had already asked per county's health department's regulation, we need to wear our mask during the meeting because this is an indoor meeting. Other business as usual, all voting and second, all motion and second requires a roll call vote. And with that said, I think we can about start our meeting. And before that, just want to make sure any public are here or virtually has any comments for this meeting.
Thank you, moderator. For our public joining via WebEx, we do have our Q&A panel open. This is how we will be processing comments for today's meeting. If you'd like to make a comment on today's items that are for items not on today's agenda, please click on the Q&A icon, type comment into the text field, and submit that to all panelists. And just as a matter of instructions going forward for today, as we are doing the strategic planning session, we have decided that for each goal area, there will be comments provided, comment period provided at the end of the discussion for each goal area. We will be leaving the Q&A panel open throughout the board's discussion. So if during the discussion you find you have a question or a comment that you'd like to make, please make a note of it so you don't forget what it is. And then just drop a word comment into the Q&A box and we will keep track of those. And then when it comes time for public comment at the end of each goal area, we will process the comments that have been submitted during the discussion. And with that, we do not have any requests for public comment at this time, so we will close the Q&A panel until we get to our first goal area.
Thank you, moderator. Now I'd like to introduce the session of strategic planning. And we have DCS solid unit staff with us. And I think the lead of the discussion will be Sarah Irani. Is that the case? Okay. Now, Sarah, because half of the members have not attended the previous strategic planning session, so it might be beneficial if you could take some time, go over the environmental scan and the finding of which you can have the entire morning if you think you want to go through details. So that will be very helpful, okay? No, not quite on yet.
There we go.
Okay, great, yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
All right. For our agenda today, I will go over what strategic planning is and kind of give a rundown of that. And we'll also have time to review that environmental scan if you didn't have time to review that prior to today's session. So I believe we'll go ahead and begin. I do have the presentation on both screens. So if you need to, you can look at the one behind you, or you can look to the one that is to your left. So go ahead and begin with the Architects Board strategic planning session. My name is Sarah Irani. I am a facilitator with Solid, and I also have my co-moderator with me today.
Hi, I'm Tricia St. Clair. I'm also a facilitator with Solid.
And so our role today is that we're going to be kind of a neutral party and more facilitating the discussion and providing structure for the meeting today. We'll also be documenting the discussion on the PowerPoint slides. And when we're coming up with objectives later today, I would like to remind board members that we will correct grammar and spelling later. This is kind of a first draft, so we don't want to focus too much on wordsmithing and grammar and spelling. All right, for your participation today, I do ask that you minimize distractions. Please put your phones either on mute or vibrate. I also ask that you respect one another's contribution, allow people to speak their ideas, don't interrupt each other. Additionally, please suspend judgment while everyone is brainstorming. We'd like to have everyone have their ideas presented. We'll also ask that you please self-monitor for time limits and side conversations. While we do only have 4 goal areas to work with today, and we're not expected to go the full day, if we don't have as many side conversations, we're more likely to get this done faster, and that means you guys get to leave earlier, because no one likes strategic planning. Additionally, we also ask that you please be willing to reach a consensus. If it's something that you can live with, then we'll go with that. So if you're really hard set on something, just ask yourself, can I live with this? And if the answer is yes, then we can move on. So for our agenda today, we did our quick introductions. We'll give an overview of what the strategic planning process is. We'll review what the board's mission, vision, and values are. And then we'll talk about our goal statements. And then after that, we'll go into the actual discussion, which is objective development. And we have 4 goal areas that we're going to be creating objectives for. So what is strategic planning? It basically boils down to 3 questions. Our first question being, where are we now? This is your mission, and then also the environmental analysis. The environmental analysis was that scan that you were provided, which both internal and external stakeholders were allowed to comment on where they think the board is currently and where the profession is currently. And that tells you where you are now. The next question is, where are we going? This is your vision statement. Your vision statement is basically, if you have achieved everything for your mission, where do you want to be? And then our third question for strategic planning is, how do we get there? These are going to be our goals and objectives. Our goals being the 4 goal areas, and those objectives are going to be the sort of steps that go underneath it. The difference between a goal and an objective, because they do sound very similar, goals are going to be a lot more broad and not as narrow focused, while your objectives are going to be a lot more narrow and focused on what you want to achieve. So before we begin, we're actually going to do a fun little activity. You should have a paper in front of you with a bunch of numbers on it. Has anyone seen this activity before we get started? No? Great. So I'll ask that you pull that sheet out in front of you and then get something that you can tap things with. And so what you'll be doing is you're going to find the number 1 and then you're going to tap it. And then you're going to find the number 2 on that sheet and then tap that. And then you're going to keep going for the next 30 seconds until you are able to get to the highest number you can. Now before we begin, there's 54 numbers on there. I want you guys to set yourselves a goal. What's the highest number you think you can get to? Any comments? 22? All right, so I'm going to start at, I'm sorry?
30.
30, all right.
We're good. Come on.
Okay, so before we start, let me make sure I set to 30 seconds and not 30 minutes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start the timer, and then you guys try to get to the highest number you can. Go ahead and start.
I can't find 3. Oh, there it is.
All right, time's up. What's the highest number you got to? 11?
4.
4?
14.
All right, so 14 was the highest? All right, well, what if I told you if you had a strategy, you could get to a higher number? So I'm going to give you guys a hint. If you look on the screens, there's actually a guide. So our number 1 is going to be in that little number 1 box. 2 is going to be in 2. 3 is going to be in the 3 box. And then you'll keep going until you reach 10 up at the top again. So I'm going to time you guys again for 30 seconds and see if you can get to a higher number now that you know the strategy. So I'll go ahead and start now. All right, so that was 30 seconds. Did you get to a higher number?
Yep.
Yeah.
What's the highest number you got?
41.
41!
Give us a strategy, guys. Come on. What'd you guys get?
I got 21.
21 is still better than 14. All right, so it sounds like got a lot higher numbers than when we didn't have the strategy. So when we provide framework for what we need to do, it becomes easier. And as you've noticed, improve the hour efficiency. A lot of people were able to increase their numbers or even double them. And this is because we had an easy to follow structure on how to achieve our goals. Strategic planning helps organizations plan on what they're going to do, set patterns, and map out a plan for efficiency. And that's what we're going to accomplish today by setting objectives. This will allow our board to accomplish our objectives a lot easier with less work, frustration, hassle, etc. All right, so our strategic planning roadmap, there's 5 steps in the strategic planning process, and we've completed our first 2, which was the preliminary meeting and setup. This was meeting with our executive officer, Laura, kind of defining how we're going to do the plan, introduce our facilitators, and then the second step was the environmental scan, which was, if you remember, conducting interviews with everyone here, getting your feedback from both the board members, executive staff, and we also got feedback from our stakeholder survey. All that information was analyzed and compiled into the environmental scan report, which highlights common trends and themes that everyone kind of agreed about the board. So right now we are at the planning session, and what we're going to do is we're going to review our accomplishments, review the mission, vision, and values, review that environmental scan, and then establish our goals and objectives. After today, what we'll do is I will be drafting the strategic plan once we have come up with those objectives. We'll then review the plan with our executive officer and then also the board members before the board members approve and then adopt the plan, and then that plan will be published. After that, we'll do action planning, which is going to be more with the board staff and the board executive management to kind of prioritize which objectives we want to complete first and then add steps and timelines for each one. And we will draft that action plan and review it with the client. So at this point, are there any questions before I move on? Nope? All right. So if you remember, during the interviews, we asked questions based on a SWOT analysis. And if you don't remember what SWOT means, it's not SWOT with an A, but with an O, and that's strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. What we want to do is our strengths and weaknesses are internal, and our opportunities and threats are external. So internal are going to be more directly related to the board, whereas your external are going to be more related to like the profession as a whole and outside external factors. What we want to do is we want to capitalize on those strengths and opportunities while trying to mitigate our weaknesses and threats. You can kind of think of it as, like for strengths, what do we want to sustain? For opportunities, what opportunities should the board capitalize on? Weaknesses, what can the board solve or improve on? And then threats, or you could say challenges instead of threats. If threat sounds too strong of a word. These are what do you want to mitigate? So for our environmental analysis, we had a very large participation from a previous one. 2018 had 44 participants, and 2021 had 1,534. This is a over 3,300% increase in the participation. We've been noticing this a lot with other boards and bureaus. A lot of recent boards and bureaus have had a lot more participation recently. We don't know if it's COVID related or if it's just more people are accessing the surveys online now, but increased participation is always good because then you get more feedback and more data to work with to kind of come up with those objectives. So that's a breakdown of everyone who participated in that external stakeholder survey. I believe that is also in your environmental scan as well. I don't remember what page, unfortunately. All right, so we will go ahead and review our mission statement. So our mission statement is the California Architects Board protects consumers by establishing standards for professional qualifications, ensuring competence through exams, setting practice standards, and enforcing Architects Practice Act. So while we're coming up with objectives today, we want to make sure that we're kind of keeping this mission statement in mind. The board's vision statement is the California Architects Board will be the national leader of regulation and architectural practice. Our vision is more what we want to be if we achieve everything possible. It's not always, it's our ideal state. While it kind of seems kind of lofty, that's sort of what the vision statement is supposed to be in a perfect world. And then our values. This is something you also want to keep in mind while you're creating objectives. Our values being collaborative, professional, innovative, proactive, and diversity. Okay. So objectives. When we're creating objectives today, we want them to be SMART. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-based. And I'm actually going to pass it over to Tricia because Tricia has a great example of this.
All right, so let's say you come up with an objective for yourself that you're going to be a nicer person. Is that specific? Well, my idea of nicer is probably different than yours. Measurable? How do you measure nice? Action-oriented? Again, nice. Realistic? Probably. But again, maybe not. Time-based? Not at all. But if you come up with an objective that you're going to smile at and greet 2 people a day, that's very specific. You're smiling, you're greeting 2 people a day. Measurable? Absolutely, because it's 2 people every day. Action-oriented? Yes, you're smiling and greeting. Realistic? I think we could all handle smiling and greeting 2 people a day. And time-based? Yes, it's a day. So when we come up with objectives, that's what we want. We want them to be SMART.
And so to help with objective creation, we actually have a formula. And I believe this was also provided in your board packet. So our objective formula is going to be an action, a goal or issue, and then the benefit and why. So we have a couple examples up here on the screen. Our first one being our action word, create. What's the goal or issue? An expert witness manual for subject matter experts. And what's the benefit for creating this manual? This is to increase the effectiveness of reports. All right. And then at this point, I actually scheduled a break, but if you get to kind of let you digest everything that just happened, but if we want to continue on, we can. I'll defer to the board members.
Yeah, we will continue on, looks like. Yes? I just want to have a housekeeping item here. The way you're viewing this is too difficult. If it's too difficult, I would not mind changing the seat if you want to move your seat around. fine. Okay, so feel free. Other than that, I think after the session, you can share with us your slides deck, Sarah, right? Okay, good. Let's continue. Thank you.
All right, in that case, I will go ahead and do a little shuffle. Please ignore my break slide. All right, so we're going to start off with our first goal area of professional qualifications. And to refresh everyone, this goal area is described as ensure the professional qualifications of those practicing architecture by setting requirements for education, experience, and examinations. The summary in your environmental scan should be on pages 6 through 11. And then if you want to look at those comments that were given by both external stakeholders and then the internal stakeholders, those should be on pages 39 through 83. I'll give you guys just a moment to kind of look through that. Tricia and I are going to do a little bit of shuffling, and she'll be typing up our objectives as we get to it.
And this is the moderator on WebEx. Just as a reminder for our members of the public joining via WebEx, we have opened our Q&A panel. We're going to leave this open during the discussion of this little area. If you find you have a question or comment that you would like to submit, you can click on that Q&A icon on your screen, type comment into the text field, and submit that to our panelists. You may submit those at any time during the discussion. And at the conclusion of the board's discussion, we will be opening it up for public comment, and at that time, we will call on anyone who has submitted a request to allow you to provide your comment verbally.
So if you go to the first tab, the first tab is the old strategic plan. You know, out of that, I get into the scan, which is next. There you go. So now you want to next tab. Okay. That's that section. Environmental. Now you're yeah. So there you are. Page 6 there. All of the comments regarding these sections are understood. I'm assuming it's quite literal, right? But that's a good question. I don't know, I wrote it right here. The difference between board staff and management.
The board staff are gonna be, anyone who's not in a manager position.
You haven't missed anything much. If you want to speak, you gotta, you gotta press, that means it's on now.
No, I'm here, so as long as I'm off, I'm good.
Who's sitting here?
They just have to come again.
Put it the green light.
All right, and this is Sarah. I just want to double check if everyone's had enough time to review. If not, I can give additional time. Yeah, sure. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I can come by and try to answer.
Yeah. So, members, I have a suggestion to make this a more interactive. We're thinking about in both reading and discussion format. So, Laura and I have read a few times and had a few discussions. We have some insight in our view. May be helpful to express, what we have been discussed. See if any helpful to you at all, and you will still have enough time for yourself to read. And after that, Sarah will actually give her summary purely based on data. So, is that okay? All right, or you prefer read?
Sounds fine to me.
I guess my question is, should we skip to the data first? Like, should we have a conversation from board management, from board president representative, and then skip immediately to the data? And then if there's a need and a feeling that we need to go back to sort of parse all the requirements, because we've had this information for a while, to sort of check through. So should we trust that we've spent some time with it, trust the data, and begin the conversation about it, a more active conversation?
You are in support of this approach, yeah. So with that said, actually, we'd like to start with this objective area, professional qualification. And I think the board has done, it's on page 6, reasonable, well, and one or two areas are actually measurable, and we had the deliverables presented to the full board. So I actually like Laura maybe give 2 to 3 minutes of her observation. And then if I have additional comments added to it, I will. Otherwise, I will open up for a quick, Q&As for the members who have questions. And then we will carry that pattern. Okay? Good. Laura, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I think, like Sunny said, all of you have had a chance to review the material. So I was just going to briefly mention the ones that stood out to me in the professional qualifications area. There's lots of comments on continuing education, which I think members would expect, but there are some in favor of the existing requirement. But lots of people asking why they need to keep doing the same requirement every 2 years, the same ADA requirement. So I think, we can have discussion on that, and maybe we need to do a better job educating licensees as to why that is and why the board doesn't have the ability to change that. And then we will begin educating licensees about the new requirement taking effect, I think in 2023, from the bill the governor signed this year. There's also a lot of comments on the California supplemental exam, which I think I was a little bit surprised. Some people like it, and some people think we need, it's time to get rid of the supplemental exam. So I know the board has interest in talking about this and the topic, so I think that's something we haven't spent a lot of time on in the past, but would be good to discuss. And comments about making licensing a goal for new architects and being more engaged with educational facilities, something also we've discussed in the past, but it was interesting to see that in the comments. And also comments about improving diversity and being proactive and educating people about changes in the profession and in our statutes. So there wasn't anything too surprising to me in this area, but I was interested in the amount of comments on CSE as well as on continuing education.
One area that I observed, I also participated myself, was the revisit of the need for modernized, I call them, a continuing education requirement. The committee, under the full board's instruction, had worked a few sessions and actually delivered pretty comprehensive suggestions for board to take action. That had to be developed in timely because the AB 1010 was just passed and signed by the governor, which required all architects in California to take 5 hours of net zero carbon design as a mandatory education requirement, in addition to the 5 existing hours of ADA accessibility. So it will be very helpful later today. I like the board member to see what's PQC's recommendation are and what is the law now require us to implementing AB 1010. So that will be a very good discussion. And it just seeing the data here seems both board members, staff, also the external stakeholders recognize and some of the PQC's work in this area was notable. I think rankings considerably higher from few entities, ranging from effective to very effective. So that's something that I observed, yeah.
Can I comment or ask questions now, or what?
Yeah, any comments, ask for clarifications, or if you want to have a dialogue, we can.
Just 2 points. One is I presume, but maybe you can clarify this when you discuss the data, that this climate change add-on to the CLE requirements wasn't really in the universe, so to speak, when these people made their comments, right? Okay. And then I'd like to know the numbers of people who really complained about the CSE being not good, because I'd not heard that before. So I don't know if that's a handful of people, or if it was significant enough to really be something that we should be concerned about.
Great. And I think Sarah, you want to maybe click on the data?
So I believe it will be on page,
Oh, sorry.
one moment while I use the touchpad. Page 10 of the environmental scan, there should be a chart that kind of adds numbers to each of the comments. Some of the comments, as far as like where it says exam and exam prep, sometimes they weren't specific about if it was the California supplemental exam or not. So they might be broken up into there, but it does add numbers for each of the comments. And if you want to look at the raw comments, those should be on, starting on page 55.
So, Rob, I think you saw some comments or reactions about California's supplementary exams, right? So on page 10, there's quite a bit external stakeholder has a comment on that. 18% is the fifth, large quantity comments they have.
But is that the supplemental exam, that the one that has 18 comments, is that specifically comments, do we know that that metric is specifically about the supplemental or just the exam in general?
I try to get to see if we have that granularities from the survey. Perhaps not.
There's a separate category for supplemental examination and it only has 4 comments.
Yeah.
But exam has 18 and oral exam has 8.
My guess is that there's probably some of each in each of those categories. So if you just kind of add them together, maybe remove a few, it's still smaller response on those items. I don't see it as a focus from what the comments that I read, because there are a lot of comments in the strengths section as well as the weakness. So like, I think they need to be weighted against the strength section. So for instance, on the strength of the exam, the supplemental, there are 8 comments versus 4 negatives. And then on the exams, there are much more comments on the strengths on the 37. So 37 positive strength comments versus 18 on the negative side. So again, I don't know what I'll have to be sort of wrangled into like what our focus is on here in this particular comment, where we're sort of trying to go. We're trying to find a consensus for areas that we need to focus on. I don't see that as an area personally that we need to focus on.
I would agree.
Okay. Any other observations, other issues that you?
And also just in regards to the supplemental, I feel like we all had a really good conversation at our last meeting about understanding the metrics for how the questions that were being asked ended up on the test. And it felt pretty solid from my point of view that everyone on the board was feeling comfortable about that process. I mean, that's just my recollection.
I have a question for Laura. Laura, did I hear you mention the complaints about weaknesses as to practical experience? I didn't hear you list that, and that's item 4 under weaknesses.
Which page are you looking at?
Page 9, item 4. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Okay, so those are comments for the board members. I actually have a note to myself that I don't know what it means, so I guess I would maybe turn around and ask the board members who made the comment what it is specifically you're looking for in this area.
Those are board member comments?
Yeah.
That came up in the board member interviews.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't me.
I'll look at the detailed comments and see if I can understand it a little bit better.
Okay, I have another question. What's striking to me under professional qualifications, page 6, the chart, are we talking about that now? Can we talk about that now?
Yeah, that's this category, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's striking to me is that the external stakeholders, the board members, and the board staff all seem to agree that that professional qualifications committee or the professional qualifications themselves, I'm not clear which, are very effective. But board management, 4 people, think quite to the contrary. And, I'd be interested to discover why.
If you go up one line to very effective, they actually think that things are doing even better than external.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to stay on this chart, and on the stakeholders, obviously there's, 20 or so people that feel that we're poor or very poor in effectiveness. Can we talk about that? Because obviously we are serving those constituents, and we need to figure out what it is that they are not happy with.
Where's the 20% line, Nilza? Are you talking on external stakeholders, the 13 and the 4, 17?
Yes, 13 and 4.
Got it, yeah. And so if 682 people, yeah, that's quite a bit of people. I agree.
Yeah, so I think we need to address that and try to figure out what we can do to do a better job to serve them.
Well, I think if you go to the external stakeholder comments page, the
Page
weakness,
7.
10, I think,
No, I
for
think
weaknesses.
7.
Those are the strengths on page 7.
7.
So if you go to
10?
page 10, yeah. These are external stakeholder comments. The CE variety, it keeps popping up, and that's definitely been part of our discussion. So again, not to jump ahead or get in the way of your process, but I think the communication of, I think so many architects in California don't understand why we have to take the ADA 5. And so I think if there was some clear, concise sort of direction every time this comes up to remind people this was a lawsuit, this was, just some quick sort of thing that sort of describes the history of it. And I think that will also make the new requirements sort of easier to swallow when they understand that our hands are tied on the 5. That's why we're doing the new 5. And so some kind of like quick cheat sheet, both digitally and if we are still mailing correspondence, that says these are like, and not just the CE requirements, but like these are the 10 things that like if we were to give a sort of cheat sheet for the California Architects Act, these are the things that you need to be doing as a licensed architect, and you're about to renew. Are you doing these things? Is your, we've just passed, AB 1010, and these are the new requirements. Your license needs to be on your business card now, and just some sort of cheat sheet that would maybe sort of respond to all of those CE negative comments. I think that would also speak to the communication layer, which is there were 28 negative responses there, and again, the continuing education 27. So just within those 3 categories, there's nearly 100 negative responses. I think that would go a long way.
Laura, when is the communication committee meeting again?
We don't have a meeting scheduled, so when there's a new strategic plan adopted, we'll appoint new committees, so probably in the first quarter
So
of
can
next
we
year.
then, Mr. President, direct them to deal with this issue both on our newsletter and our email?
Yes.
To all of our constituents?
That could be one of the objectives.
This is one of our objectives. This is the area compared with the professional qualifications, the communication has more improvement to make. So this will be a focus of discussion today. So thank you for reminding us, Mitra.
And the communication group or committee would need to meet often enough to make sure that we see through that these things are
Part of the
done.
conversation, we have actually some concrete recommendations. I'm glad that the full board is here today. And then in responding to the comments, Nilza, the external stakeholders, including the architecture professionals as well. So it could be just other architects like AIA and different organizations, they express their concerns. And I don't know our questions. I don't think CE variety is a very conclusive. One of the concerns definitely, Sunny, is something why is just the ADA, right? Why not expand? But if we need to know more detail, then I'm not sure we have the data to support that. But I guess what the board can act on this is based on our committee's findings for continuing education and overlaying the legal requirement now, AB 1010, how can we take this opportunity, assuming there are negative feelings about continuing education, how next 3 years we will implement something that we think will improve the continuing education's relevance and quality. So,
Hey, Niels, if I can just make one more comment into your mention about the negative comments and what they're getting at. You can't tell exactly, but when you look at the detailed comments in the weaknesses and the stakeholder comments, you can probably relate. And so some of them are, like, it's time to give up the supplemental exam, the exam's very arbitrary, doing stupid accessibility courses every 2 years is worthless. There's a lot of comments like that. So I think we can try to identify what their concerns are and see what we can do to address it.
Is there a way for us to put a pop-up on our website so that's the first thing that kind of sends into a question and answer page if they want to go into details of that? I'm not sure it can be done, but if it can, that addresses anyone that goes into the website. If you have questions,
pop up.
that pop up and then hit there, and then they want to kind of navigate the website for other things they can, but I think most people go in for Q&A.
So there's a lot of talk about the what to do with the CE requirements, and I think that's a good idea to go over to our objective development. We've been writing down a couple things you've all been saying, but I would like to get some more details from everyone. It was Sonia's first comment about promoting. We have the action word promote, and then the issue was we kind of got some of it while you were discussing, was taking a certain exam.
Yeah, I think that's not clear. I think when we were talking about the exam, it was that basically the work that the board and the staff are doing right now is sufficient as in regards to the existing promotion of the California supplemental and the exam. It felt like a safe area that did not need work on improvement.
Okay, so we can delete that
I
first
think
one
we
that we
can
have
delete,
up there? Okay.
for me, I think we can delete that line.
And then, I don't know if you guys have in front of you, but while we're discussing today, I do have colored index cards while we're doing objective creation. So if you do have a comment that you wish to make, or like an objective that you would like to say, if you could raise the red card, because that indicates like, stop, I have something to say. If you're ready to move on to our next goal area, if you could raise the green card, then I know that everything's good and ready to go. So if anyone has like an objective that they would like to add. I saw one from Ebony.
I'd like to modify develop. Well, we can develop, but I think we also need a partner for our communications with our associations like AIA and make sure that things get out after we develop the communication.
Okay, so our action word is modify a partner, and the issue was.
Do you mean modify the one that's already up there, Ebony?
Yeah,
Oh,
but
so develop
it's
and partner?
yeah, develop and partner.
Okay.
So Sunny recommended developing communications to one, creating a cheat sheet and information on why, like the why of why things are being implemented. So 10 things, a 10 things cheat sheet, why you have to take the ADA 5, and then why your license number needs to be on your business cards, or also letting them know it has to be on their business cards and why. And then I think we need to be better at getting the information out there, so partnering with AIA and other associations.
Okay, so develop a partner with AIA.
I have a few comments on the AIA situation. So for me, one of the complications with partnering with the AIA on something like that is that they're really a national organization, and so it gets really complicated for them to sort of break out, and the truth is they just really don't. So like, for instance, the AIA like client architect contracts, they don't necessarily support California law, so they have to be changed and modified. And so I think in some ways sort of leaning on them to do the outreach becomes problematic. It's also like a little bit of a conflict of interest because it is an outside sort of organization that has a lobbying arm. They do really wonderful things for us, but when it comes to this, I think we need to personally have just a very clear sort of outreach to the public as to these are our requirements, and we just need to get it in front of people. And then the AIA can, of course, use that, and like AIA California, which would be the local organization, absolutely the communication with them to sort of get that information out. But I think the source of the information needs to be from us.
Yeah, I agree with you partially. I mean, I think the source needs to be us, but I did notice a lot of comments at the end of the booklet about how the AIA has a liaison to us who comes to our meetings, but we don't have any person to go to their meetings. And granted that their meetings involve national issues, and they have
Local as well. I mean, but
there are things that a local chapter does, and the fact that we don't have a liaison to them means we're not communicating with them as well as they're communicating with us. And I would like the communications committee to consider us having a liaison that attends their important meetings.
That is a very interesting observation, Greg. I see the same trend. I did not make that comment. Well, I perhaps made that comment. Is one-way traffic. That AIA spend a considerable effort to monitoring, communicating this board, attending every meeting. He perhaps is there, Mark Christian, if you're there, you are testament of that. So the communication should be both ways. I did at the limited capacity. I volunteered myself at AIA California on resilient design. I founded a committee there. However, this is not official channel, so I do support the communication should be both ways. I'll tell you why. If we had early communication with AI, work together on the draft of AB 1010, perhaps I will see a better integration of our modernization of continuing education, and there are very specifically defined objective, and I think I see a tremendous synergy if we had that bilateral communication early on. So that's my just a personal observation. Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I guess my point wasn't that we shouldn't be communicating with them, but that, like, we just really, as an organization, need to do a better job with communicating our requirements.
It looks like I do have some more comments for objectives. From Ebony had her hand up first, and then Milza. Thank you.
So I guess my question is, it's more of a question. So I know prior to Laura, Doug was super present with NCARB, and we never really had anybody going to AIA, but we always see Mark all the time. So is there a reason why we weren't as present to the local AIA? Maybe there's a reason or history behind it, because he was always here, so maybe that's something that we would ask Laura to do, not a board member, but a staff member to do and build that relationship so it's continuous after we're sitting on this board. Oh, I agree.
Is this Mark Christina?
Christian.
Christian, okay. It looks like he is in the webcast right now.
Yeah,
He's always around.
So, Ebony, I would say I don't know maybe the history of it, but I don't know if there was a point at which AIA California wanted us to be present at their meetings, but I do have regular communications with their staff. So it could be also just that I need to update you more as to what those are. But we do have regular communications, primarily through Mark, but I also, and others, just so we're on the same page. Like Sunny alluded to, we don't have the same mission, so we're not always going to be in agreement on what we want to do or have the same goals, but we do work together when possible. And I think the board and AIA California have a good relationship.
Okay. So let me suggest actually put the action.
Okay.
Resume, we had some early, quite a few years ago, resume a regular communication with AIA by attending a joint meeting once a year. At that time, I remember that is we have executive director and a couple of board members actually set up a meeting just between the two organizations, talk about the business plan strategies for the next year. So we had some similar like this. We can institute that. So, yeah.
And then what would our benefit be for resuming that regular communication with AIA?
Because we will together give a consistent message to architects in California and also consumers as well.
Okay. And is this just going to be just for licensees or also candidates as well?
Candidates as well.
Candidates as well?
Yeah.
We can add them there. Okay. Milza had her red card up first, and then Sony, so we'll go with Milza.
Thank you. I'd like to suggest that we partner with DCA and create vignettes or little videos explaining to our consumer base what all of the challenges that they are asking or questions they're asking in a video form. I think there's enough talent around this table that can address those videos in some kind of a precise, more accurate manner than including a cheat sheet.
Yeah. Again, it's on our list in the communication objectives. We actually have a plan, ask the board to produce a video to be interactive so public can log on, know everything about the board.
Yeah, some of these areas are going to cross over, but I think like some of what we have listed here really belongs more appropriately in either communications or organizational relationships, but we can kind of move them, I guess, as we proceed.
Yeah. Actually, on the partner with DCA, I think that might actually fit better as an action item under the development partner. We'll take out with AIA. Because it sounds like a step that we could do in that communications plan. So we'll make a note that that's going to be an action item for later. Okay, and then Sony had a red card up earlier. Do we have a?
Yeah, I sorry to be a broken record here, but I'll go back to, like, we're talking about professional qualifications, weaknesses, trends, and so just going back through some of, like, even some board staff or board management comments, like, while we're talking about the AIA, it would be like communication and conversations, like, regarding, like, the use of the word AIA and how it's confusing, that some non-architects use it, and it's sort of taken and considered that person is an architect when they're not. And so that popped up in the board, some of the, not the board comments, but staff or management comments. So you can be in, like, you as a lawyer could be a member of the AIA without being an architect.
Yeah,
So if
for
you
example, I'm a member, but it's called an affiliated member. It's not a real member.
But just for communication to the public, that can be confusing. So I think that was the point of the comment. It's not my comment.
I see.
I got it out of the text, and I'm sort of transcribing it. But I think that was the point. And
see.
it was in a section that was dealing with, like, how does this board, like, we're really sort of regulating the regulated. What about these unlicensed people? How do we regulate them? And that was sort of some of the comments that I was sort of reacting to. So I bring that up again just to state that, like, at the end of the day, all we can really do is regulate the regulated, because that's what we're here to do, and that there's no laws that sort of give us any ability to sort of regulate the unlicensed. We can only sort of punish or, hold people accountable that have licenses. And so in regards to professional qualifications, I think it would be nice to just communicate with our licensees. These are the requirements for being a California licensed architect, instead of just saying, like, here's the code. It would be nice when you got your renewal form, you were alerted of SB 1010 and all of those things sort of in there. Like, this is what's happened since the last time you became an architect 2 years ago. And I think that would be really effective, great communication. And then that could then be shared with AIA, of course, all the time.
Sunny, this is a perfect agenda item for what we want Institute that have an annual meeting, lay out these concerns, and that is interesting in both organizations. Yeah. I have a few items that in terms of our actual business, we need to work with legal to really look into how do we implementing AB 1010. So I don't know the verb, maybe work with legal. And the what is implementing AB 1010 now is a law. So, and then how we align with that the findings from our own PQC committee about the continuing education. I see some challenge there already to see and how they relate to and integrate and supporting each other. So that takes some work at both staff and the committee level. So I want the next PQC committee put this on the agenda. That's the one. And I think we need also update, because over the years we talk about the education experience required to be licensed. California has our own table, defines, what degree accounts to how many years of experience. I don't know how do we properly call this. Laura called this maybe experience equivalent educational requirement.
Table of equivalents?
Yeah, that has been many years to my knowledge, and we need to look at it to see if we need to make any adjustment. That is the issue I think will also reflect the equity issue as well. See if we are not over limit that experienced student that prevent them to taking exams. We can also weed out people who not having a proper education that proclaims they have the equivalent. So I think we need the word will be update that our education equivalent for the experience equivalent from the education, and the benefit is what I have just said, and also I think it belongs to this categories of concern is,
Before we move on, could we get the benefit for that first one you have, the work with legal to implement AB 1010?
for the benefit, to provide more consistent and in other words, to make the continuing education mandate more reflects to today's practice.
More relevant.
Okay, more relevant. And how do we abbreviate that? Maybe Mike can help. How do we abbreviate that?
Mr. President, Michael Knitz, legal counsel. Legal would be assisting you to develop regulations to implement AB 1010. But certainly legal can also assist you with other endeavors in terms of continuing education requirements.
Yeah.
There's a specific requirement in AB 1010 to adopt regulations.
Yeah. So,
And that's part of the benefit, is that we need to comply with the statutory requirement.
yeah. That's interesting. It's a legal requirement. It's also a benefit too. So, yes.
Should we then also put on the agenda the SB 9, which I think is going to affect architects and consumers?
SB9?
Yeah. That just got signed into law, and that's
On the PQ agenda? Is that-
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
SB9 being the ability to split a lot and put 2 units on
Yes.
each new lot?
Yes, because there's going to be a ton of non-architects approaching homeowners.
That's
to-
true.
Yeah.
That's
So we
true.
need to address that and figure out how we're going to mitigate that challenge before it happens. And that should be also on the communications committee agenda, that they need to send out something, maybe a PSA, to let people know that they have to check people's license before they partner with anyone to create an ADU or a second home or.
Well,
Yeah.
they're not required.
Right.
Yeah.
We were just, go ahead.
You're not required to be an architect to develop an ADU.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
single.
But I think we need to protect the consumer somehow, some way, because
But
I don't know what that's going to look
that-
like. Because it's SB 9 bypassing city permits, right? So then somebody's going to have to oversee that.
If jurisdictions are required to enforce it and to enforce the application, but they can't limit it. Well, that's not completely true. They can limit it under certain circumstances when it's at risk, provides a risk to the public safety.
And it still goes through a full permit process. So the building,
Yeah.
We can definitely do outreach about what the
Yeah.
law allows, what
True.
it doesn't allow, and something for consumers, so they're aware.
So,
yes.
so that's an excellent point, that I think the public deserves some help from our board, is telling them the process like this does not replace the current law, which is current law fully enforceable in these incidents in terms of architecture practice. If the home modification or remodeling does not require architect, they will still not require architect. If they require architect, and it will be still required. So, but it is good for this board because we're kind of authoritative voice, just to clear the cloud, to tell them, don't be confused by that, current laws enforced. Yeah.
I have a question about that. I mean, I wonder if that's a direction we should head, because if we're explaining SB 9 and the need for architects, why aren't we also doing that with regard to ADU? Because just in the last year, the ADU laws were changed to make them much more extensive and flexible and impose more and more limits on localities. So, I mean, I'm just wondering, aren't they the equivalent?
Well, I think we are just talking about this. That's a great point to bring into all these processes about promoting housing may not trigger any changes of current law. That's the point. I think this board can tell the public and consumers, don't be consumed or don't be confused. All the current laws still apply when architects are required, when architects not required. So I think that's the key message we want propagate. Yeah.
I Okay, so it looks like we have our, for the SB9, we have our action word as explain and then the issue SB9 to the public. And this is to help the public understand what permits are required for architects. Correct? No?
No. Yeah.
That's okay. In that case, can I ask that we go in order of each?
So, yeah.
And just a little bit slower, just so we can make sure that we capture everything correctly?
So to maybe the benefit is to clarify the current architectural practice law is not affected by this
Okay, so to
SB9.
clarify current
Right,
architects.
yeah.
Or to clarify the role of the architect.
Yeah,
The role of
yeah.
the architect.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'd say the issue should be SB9 and ADU law, and then the benefit should be the, as written, but I would put SB9 and ADU law amendments,
Uh-huh.
both under the issue.
But that was, it was AB,
ADU, additional residential unit.
Accessory
Yeah.
dwelling unit.
thank you.
Yeah.
For the action, I would sorry, Sunny.
That's right.
For the action, I would just clarify develop communication so that it falls under the communication.
Yeah, it should follow communication. I hope someone's taking note. This one's really more fit for communication.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Sunny, sorry.
so we'll copy this one over to the communication.
Yeah.
Want to make sure that we're staying on track with professional qualifications and the issues that were brought up there. So, Sunny had the little red card up. No? Okay, no more comments.
So one thing we have discussed about it, and relates to AB 1010, I think belongs to here, is the climate resiliency. How licensees or actually the candidates should be regulated or told or informed, or I think that's something we should start to look. Maybe good for this discussion because strategic plan is looking forward to 3 or 4 years down to the road. So I see some potential impact. One is California mandatory supplementary exams, right? 30 years ago, California was the lead to put seismic design requirement as part of supplementary exams. So today we're facing very similar concerns. Should we test the California architects' minimum knowledge of what the impact of flood, what is the impact of excess heat, things like that. So
If I could just interject on that one, I
Yeah.
think, as Sunny alluded to earlier, we had that discussion at the last board meeting from Office of Professional Exam Services, kind of on how the board can and cannot weigh in on topics for the supplemental exam. So because we have AB 1010 that was chaptered in any other climate legislation, they will look at that and kind of build it in if it's necessary into the supplemental exam, but we can't really direct the topics of the exam. Am I summarizing that right for?
Okay, it may be,
Just to keep in mind.
yeah, further discussion is needed. I don't think a board wants to dictate the specific name of the test, but I think a board should set that the consumer protection and the California architects competence standard. So how do we implementing this may be different. By this strategic work session, the staff maybe already get a message, Laura, that when you hire experts to develop these questions, perhaps naturally can incorporate this requirement.
That was my understanding from the end of the last presentation, was that we could absolutely sort of send suggestions that this is, and that they would listen to that voice. But that it becomes problematic when we start dictating the specific categories and the quantity and quality of the questions on the exam. And I started that conversation, before we had that conversation, I was really hoping that we could sort of drive directly the amount, the quantities, but I walked away feeling really comfortable with their system and how it sort of even aligned with the NCARB system and the test taking. So I personally walked away feeling like our conversations were going to be heard and that we could certainly let them know our concerns and that that information would be taken into account. Now, again, there's a trust in the system and a process, but it's all I personally can do is trust the system.
Yeah, I want to emphasize on this. The classification of categories of 5 that constitute that exam is more of what we call the different phases of our practice does not really dictate the subject matters. Like this examining classification 1 is a contract development and project planning. Could be anything. Right? Could including climate resiliency or could not including. So I think that does not. Second, too, schematic design. Schematic for what, right? And third one, design development of what. So I think all these categories are, when we have our input, it will not change the nature of its exam. It's organized by 5 categories nicely. Just the content will be added to it, right?
Yeah, and I'd say also the benefit of having something codified in law, like this new law, is that if you think about the California supplemental right now, I mean, when I took it, it was littered with CEQA, and environmental things that would not have been on there had that not been something that had been codified in law. And so I guess that's my point, is that, like to your point earlier, the benefit of having at least these 5 requirements sort of as a regulation now is that it forces the metrics of the system to include them. I don't know how we could get more granular than that. That's the part I'm struggling with.
Maybe here is, where is it? Explore and support development. The action is communicating with staff. Just ongoing communication. Staff will pass that message to the expert who formulates the exams, right? So, yeah.
Just to clarify, was that communicate with staff supposed to?
Communicate with staff is action. Issue is including climate resiliency as how do we say? Subject matter.
Priority subject matter for.
Subject matter, yeah, for
Okay,
California
as a
architects.
priority
Yeah.
for
Benefit is
the
again,
California supplementary exam.
too specific, okay, for now, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And the benefit is just consumer protection and also professional protection as well. We don't want to mislead our licensees that walk into area that we don't even know we are liable for it without the minimum education, really, yeah. And now it is very clear if you don't do the seismic according to the building code, you'll get sued, you have no excuse. But whether it's a flood or excessive rain, gray area. So also is protecting our licensee as well. Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like we.
I'm sorry.
One more objective.
Yeah, I just want to go back because something's wrong about the benefit in the top right column. It really should say, to clarify how the current architect practice law requirement is not affected.
Not, yeah.
Requirement is not affected.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then that objective, we're going to actually move to communications. We'll do that later when we get to that goal area. As of right now, though, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3,
Just want
4,
to say how-
5 objectives developed for this goal area. Do we have any others that we want to create, or do we feel that these kind of cover all the topics that were, or the issues that were addressed in the environmental scan?
The 5 is already excluding the 3 that is more suitable for planning, for communication.
The go, actually. Sorry, there's some technical issues we have to do with the slides.
So we have,
What's the process going to be for coming back to cleaning these out? Are we going to just walk away from them right now and not come back, or?
So, hopefully at our next board meeting, there'll be a draft. The board is gonna have to approve the entire strategic plan. So in a final form, similar to this one from the last one, you'll look at that and approve it.
so generally,
But
Sunny,
staff will clean
we,
it up in the meantime.
yeah, we're expected to approve, to adopt it at the next meeting, but if we have big headaches, we can delay it. We have not had additional steps, if that's what you're asking, yeah.
Okay, I'm just not sure that, and again, maybe there's not a consensus that it's important, but earlier, I don't believe that my concern about communication with licensees about requirements for like why we have ADA units and the new, paired with the communication alongside the new net carbon units.
And,
I don't feel like that that made it into the group, and maybe there's not a consensus that that's important, but I was really lobbying for really clear, concise communication with the licensees about the requirements, and then took it another step and said maybe it's even easier to sort of add some of the other new requirements as well, like adding your license to all of your contracts, all of your information, all of your business cards, all of your advertising, so just like some kind of clear piece of communication to the licensees so that we don't end up with some red tape era where, staff is bogged down with all kinds of crazy, and maybe that doesn't happen, but.
So,
I think I got exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about, and we can talk about it further as it goes into communications, but we already have in mind kind of what you're talking about and what we would need to provide to licensees.
yeah, and then one more chance that, as Laura said, that communication objectives. Yeah, okay. Yeah, how is team feel? We can move on, more ideas?
We have to go, public
All
comment.
right, so it looks like
Yeah,
we have 3 objectives listed for the professional qualifications goal area, being update education required to be licensed, which is our table equivalence table. Table of equivalence to see if any adjustments need to be made, and this will, the benefit for that, to remove barriers for licensure. I see red card, or no, yes? No, okay, just getting ready.
We may, in case some public members such as Mark Christian is there, be interested to join the conversation, I don't think we mind open a public comment.
So are we all done with objective development for professional qualifications?
For now,
Rick?
but
As long as we're not finished with the subject of professional qualifications, we're going on that, right?
Yes, we're still on this one,
Okay,
correct?
because I have a comment on the next part of the professional comments discussion, not now, thanks.
So we have 3 for professional qualifications. Do we want any more objectives or any edits to those? I just want to confirm before we do public comment for this goal area.
One more thing. We spent a lot of time, thanks to Pasquale, a former board member, going over the objectives for education of candidates and requirements. And I know that in the weakness category here, there were a lot of questions about weakness on education and it being too narrow. And I'm just wondering, to Laura, are some of the comments on the weaknesses that we got from members of the public and staff probably no longer relevant now that we've spent all that time in that committee making those changes? And could it be that some of the people who are talking about the weaknesses just aren't aware of all the changes we've made?
So that's a good question. I think if those changes were codified in statute, that would address it, but because the committee is kind of developed the outline, but we still would need to take the next step of somehow getting it actually to take effect. So we're sort of halfway done, but we need to sort of have that discussion, and also in terms of the fact that we just had this new zero net carbon design enacted and kind of
Right.
melding those two. But
it doesn't stop us from communicating what we've done to the
Right.
public, even though the state hasn't adopted it at the legislative level.
yeah, that's a good point in that we could communicate what we've done and maybe get comment back from
Yeah,
stakeholders on that.
and is that issue worth putting onto the chart here?
Very interesting, okay, but.
It could be
I
here
will
or
answer
communications.
first.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I had similar thoughts, but I like to the full board weighing on this. By simply implementing AB 1010, even we work with legal and other entities like AIA, may have not met the broad approach that the committee has presented. So, question to the full board is, should the board continue to promote that the comprehensive plan the committee presented? My personal feeling is yes, but how do we do that? I have some concerns. That means we were adding more. For example, make it more comprehensive. We were adding 5 more units to the requirement because we are not going to change the AB 1010. So is that a general direction you think the board will entertain to keep building more and more continuing education units?
Can I just suggest if the board decides they want to keep that, maybe keep it kind of open-ended so we can determine how the best way to accomplish that is? Does that make sense in terms of?
Maybe interesting approach. Approach is explore methods to implementing the QPA's
Recommendations. Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. Yeah.
The objective become, right, we don't make mandates, so we say explore.
Just to clarify, are we adding a new objective or are we modifying one of the ones that's on the board?
New
one, okay.
New ones. So again, how do we phrase it to carry on the work that PQC already developed? And for example, Sunny's looks like okay with even we're adding 5 more units, for example. So
As of right now, we only have 3 objectives for this area. So if you want to add more, you're welcome to.
Well,
I
guess, I was thinking.
So I was thinking of something more simple, which is communicate what the Professional Qualifications Committee has during the last year suggested to the legislature for adoption. I didn't quite understand your comment about adding more credits. I was thinking of something a little more simple.
okay, so
But I'm not against your comment, I just don't fully understand the connection.
we carried it further. We thought if we are going to promote the work committee has done, potentially that could lead to more continuing education requirements. So that's what we're saying here.
Yeah, and again, on my end, we did jump ahead of you a little bit, but let's come back to what Brett was talking about. But on my end, I am open to more units. And again, this kind of goes back to the conversation with the AIA, the fact that we were sort of not at the table with that, so we didn't have a conversation with that. It's our fault. But they were fired up and they did it. They got out ahead of us and they made it happen. And so there have been some concerns within our group that some of the things that we wanted to include with those additional, since if that was what we were going for, even the amount, so we just weren't part of that discussion. We are grateful for it because ultimately, it's a like I said, it's a benefit and it's in the right direction. But I also subscribe to Laura's sort of direction that that we. I don't know, slow down the process a little bit to have a sort of better conversation and maybe part of that conversation is with the AIA so that we don't sort of dig ourselves into a hole where we have 3 different disparate sort of eras of requirements that are too hard to change and manipulate in the future, because that's the problem I see with both of the 2 that are now codified, is that we now have another ADA issue that what happens in 15 or 20 years where we're still having the same conversation but about the 2 5-credit unit. So I like Laura's conversation, just like, how do we continue that conversation? But going back to Brett's point, I didn't understand the part where you were talking about the professional qualifications committee sending requests for legislation. Wouldn't that come through the board first, or like which committee are you talking about?
No, I didn't say what you thought I said.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know if I need to explain my understanding what Brett was saying. You and I carried it further than he thought. He thought we had to produce that comprehensive recommendation. Should we made public aware of it? And to what level, that I don't know. You did mention the legislation. Are you suggesting we're proposing based on that recommendation to the legislators?
No, what I was suggesting, I think just got put on the chart exactly as I wanted it to. If you look at it, it says issue what the Professional Qualifications Committee has suggested to the legislature be better communicated, and I mean communication to the public.
That's the part I don't understand, Brett. What the Professional Qualifications Committee has suggested to the legislature. I'm unaware that the Professional Qualifications Committee has suggested anything to the legislature.
I think maybe we just need to modify the issue description. So what the Professional Qualifications Committee has suggested
To the board?
to the board.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you.
Okay, that was throwing me off. I thought we had a hidden committee.
No, thank you for correcting. You read my mind.
Okay, so the way all this confusion and the fact that we didn't get to coordinate with AIA has caused this, because if it was done right, in my opinion, 1010 would have included what we had requested, and then we would have worked together. It would have gone through the political process, which it takes to get something legislated, and we didn't play in that sandbox for some reason, and so a single issue went forth, promoted by AIACC, and went through. So it's just, I'm not saying it's bad for us or bad for AIA, I'm just saying it was a missed opportunity, and we shouldn't let that happen again. It ought to be a unity of thought, taking the stuff from the committee, working with AIA to pass a much more comprehensive a 1010 that's better.
Yeah.
Because this is, and you're absolutely right about that, Sunny, that what'll happen is 5 hours, it's just going to be 5 hours that's to death. And you don't want that. So it's got to be cleaned up at some point. And I don't know how it's going to get cleaned up, Laura, but.
Sure, so I would say, not speaking on behalf of AIA California, but they did bring it to the board quite early. We talked about it at many board meetings. So, and it is more typical for a profession to go forward and sponsor CE rather than a board. But I think the best way to clean it up and to really talk about the fact that the board has a broader idea is in our next sunset review report to the legislature. We can talk about the fact that we have the AB 1010 requirement, we have the ADA requirement, the board has these other ideas. Is the legislature willing to look at making some modifications, maybe giving the board the flexibility to make changes? So that would be my suggestion, but that can be something we work on as we implement this.
I 100% agree with that direction.
Laura, just one clarification. By the time AIA presenting to the board, that resolution was adopted by the full AIA board already. So in other words, it's fixed.
Oh, sure, but they brought it, before they introduced the legislation.
Yeah, so it will be, next time it will be, every point is well taken. Next time, before that, if there's a unified voice, would be better.
They were very focused on that particular topic, for sure.
Well, it sounds like we need to be a lot more engaged. This is, again, that outreach we talked about in various sections.
Well, I think, but I struggle with that. Like, is that our place? So I will tell you, I sit on both sides of that. Like, but did we do absolutely the right thing? I don't know. It feels like not, but I also I struggle with our mission here a lot. In regards to this and some of the other sort of proactive
I think we did our job, which was to create, I mean, the committee created a list of potential topics, and it just didn't get thrown over, whatever thrown over the fence or whatever, enough for collaboration. So anyway, lesson learned.
So, any comments, or we can open to public?
Any
Yes.
additional comments? Good to go. If
Okay.
you're good to go, put your
Okay.
green card up. All right, I think at this point, we can go ahead and open up for public comment.
This is the moderator on WebEx. We have not received any requests for comments quite yet. I would remind our public that if you would like to comment on items discussed this far, please click on that Q&A icon and submit the word comment to our panelists. It looks like we do have a comment from Mark Christian. Mark, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. It's being recorded.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Mark Christian with the American Institute of Architects, California. Just want to state, hopefully what you all know, AI California is always willing to work with the California Architects Board on a coordinated and effective communication strategy to our members and on what new requirements exist due to law or regulation, and if needed, information that may be relevant to architects, such as the changes in the housing laws from SB 9, SB 10, any new changes in ADU laws. We're happy to work with the Architects Board staff to develop that information, that communication, and to have it go out in a coordinated manner. We're always here to work with you.
Thank you. And with that, I do not see any additional requests for comment at this time. However, I will leave the Q&A panel open in case more questions arise as we move along.
All right. So at this point, we'll be moving. Well, let me ask. I see that you have your lunch here. I don't know if you want to break for lunch at this point or if you want to move on to our next goal area. Break for lunch? All right. At this point, we'll go ahead and take a pause, break for lunch, 30 minutes, correct? Yeah, how much?
30 minutes is okay?
Yeah, okay. All right, and then after this, we will move on to regulation and enforcement.